They say love doesn't die. It only changes its home. But what happens when a man leaves the home where love once lived and walks into one built only on greed and lies? Chidi thought success would give him peace. But peace is not found in fancy suits or new faces. It's found in the hearts that pray for you when no one's watching. He had a wife who loved him, a child who adored him, and a life that needed nothing but gratitude. But one wrong choice, one careless step, turned his blessings into ashes. And in the end, he would learn that the most painful punishment is living long enough to feel the loss of everything you once took for granted. Ngozi's salon did not have a sign that shone at night. It had a faded curtain, an old radio that liked to crackle at the loud parts, and 3 mismatched chairs that had seen better days. It sat on a narrow street in Lagos, where traders shouted prices and Okada riders threaded like silver through traffic. But inside that little room, there was a kind of warmth money could not buy. Every morning, Ngozi unlocked the door before the sun finished waking. She tied a bright scarf over her hair, smeared a little palm oil on a dry patch of skin, and turned the radio to a station where women laughed and pastors preached in the same hour. By 7, the salon smelled like hair cream and cinnamon bread from the bakery next door. Women came in with stories, sorrows, and secrets. They left with new braids and lighter shoulders. Ngozi moved with a sure, gentle rhythm. Her hands were quick but careful. She braided with the patience of a woman who had learned to stitch life together from little things. A borrowed needle, a borrowed time, a promise kept. She knew each client's child's name, their sister's problem, the neighbor's new job. She cut hair the way she tended to a garden, with attention, with hope, and with faith. Her husband, Chidi, had the kind of calm that could sit in a room and make people feel he belonged there. He wore crisp shirts, polished shoes, and the easy smile of a man used to being listened to. He worked as a real estate consultant, not the kind that flaunted wealth on television, but the kind who met men with money and ideas. He did favors, found plots, and sometimes stayed late when there was a deal to close. Chidi and Ngozi had not been born into much, but they built their home with care. They had a small parlor with a low table and a single fan that whirred like a small airplane. The walls had framed pictures, their wedding day, a grainy photo of their first rented room, and a snapshot of a wet-eyed baby wrapped in a green blanket. Their son, Jay. Jay was 6. He ran like the sun chased him. He climbed chairs with the wild belief that he could reach the sky and laugh like he had a private joke with the world. His small feet left dusty prints around the house. He had teeth that needed fixing and a hunger for sweet things. He loved his mother's okpa and called Chidi Big Papa when he wanted to be fancy. At night after the lights went down, Jay would curl against his mother's side and whisper stories he invented about talking goats and flying buses. That evening, Ngozi swept the salon floor with the same slow, loving motion she used to sweep the kitchen. She had dyed one of the client's hair a gentle brown and braided the back of another's head into neat cornrows. The radio spoke of lost politicians and gospel choruses in the same breath. Outside, Lagos bled into evening. Street lamps blinked to life. A hawker shouted last-minute deals, and the smell of fried plantain mixed with the diesel of waiting buses. Chidi arrived home a little after 6. He had a tired kindness on his face. The kind of tired that came from work done well and meetings that hurt your head. Jay ran from the yard and climbed his father's legs, shouting, "Daddy, Daddy, buy gari balls." A game, a laugh, a little boy's simple demand for sweetness. Chidi scooped Jay into his arms and kissed his forehead. He smelled of cologne and the faint dust of new buildings. "One day, my small man," he said with the soft pride of a father. "Today is payday at the office. We will have something sweet." They ate at the small table, hands reaching for food, sharing the warmth. The meal was simple: stew, gari, and a small fish that Ngozi had carefully stretched into something festive. They talked about little things. Ngozi told Chidi about a new client who wanted a weave. Chidi recounted a funny man at the property meeting who could not stop coughing when he laughed. Jay, between bites, told a story about a schoolmate who had a pet lizard that stole his homework. After dinner, they sat on the old couch. The fan hummed above them like a low prayer. Ngozi smoothed Jay's hair and hummed a lullaby she had learned from her mother. She watched Chidi as he watched the television with half of his attention. There was comfort in that ordinary silence, the kind that only comes when two people have learned to share a life. Before bed, Ngozi took a small Bible from the shelf. The pages had softened from years of fingers tracing worn verses. She placed it beside her pillow and then whispered a short prayer. Her voice was thin and steady. "Thank you, Lord, for this home. Thank you for Chidi. Thank you for Jay. Keep us from the pride that makes men forget their beginning. Keep our hearts together." She bowed her head a little and opened her palms toward the ceiling, as if the room itself was listening. Chidi glanced over and smiled kindly. He reached for her hand and held it for a moment. He was half asleep already, his shoulders loosening into relief. He tucked his shirt and turned toward the darkness. "Amen," he mumbled, a small echo of her prayer. Ngozi watched him breathe. She watched his face soften in sleep and thought for a moment of how fragile everything was. She had once promised, in her small voice, that she would take the hard and the easy with the same hands. She had vowed to be the roof when storms came, and to be the small, warm place where laughter could sleep. She believed in the strength of quiet things, hands that made tea, a voice that calmed the night, small smiles that could stop an argument. Jay slept between them, small and warm and unaware of the complicated roads adults walked. His tiny mouth opened and closed in sleep like a bird. Ngozi kissed his forehead gently and whispered, "My child, may you grow to be gentle. May you always have enough." Outside, the Lake of Lagos light stretched and breathed. A distant horn cried. Someone laughed loudly down the road. The city held its bustle the way a theater holds a crowd. Never still, always loud. For a woman like Ngozi, the city was work and prayer, noise and neighborly kindness. It was a place where a salon could be a church and a kitchen could be a temple. On the table lay a folded letter, a small paper that Chidi had brought home that morning and forgot to hand over. Ngozi saw it now and reached for it slowly. The envelope had a company letterhead and a tone of congratulations. She read the narrow lines and her heart did a small flip. Chidi had closed a big deal. His name was written neatly at the bottom. She felt a swell of happiness for him. "God bless you," she whispered into the room. She folded the letter back and placed it on the shelf as if it were a new blessing sitting in their home. She did not know then how blessings can shift like sand when men look at them with eyes that measure value by applause and not by love. Later that night, Ngozi lay awake longer than usual. The radio had been turned off. The fan's sound was a rhythm against the hush of the house. She listened to Chidi's breathing and to Jay's soft dreaming. She tried to remember the first time Chidi had kissed her. A small, awkward meeting outside a church fete. Two shy hands, a promise made of laughter. She remembered how he held her when her mother died, how he had sat through long nights when the salon was empty, and how he had found a job that offered them a small ladder out of worry. She prayed again, quietly this time. Please keep his heart close. Let him not be taken by the shiny and the loud. Let him stay humble. The prayer came from a place of deep love, not fear. She trusted that God heard every small, honest plea. Thunder rolled at the edge of the city. It was a low sound, like a heavy car passing on a distant road. Ngozi turned over and smiled sadly at the noise. "Rain soon," she said into the dark. And then, with the soft strength that was her truth, she whispered the sentence that had become a wall around her heart. Peace doesn't live in riches. It lives in love. Outside, a single lightning fork split the sky. Quick, bright, and gone. It painted the window for a moment with cold light. The house sighed with the sound of distant rain. It was a small warning, subtle as a bruise forming under the skin. This is how peace looks before a storm. Honest, small, and unassuming. Tonight it lay in a little salon in Lagos, and in the two people who would soon be tested by choices they could not yet imagine. Tomorrow would come, full of men with pockets and promises, and for the first time, Ngozi would feel the first pull of distance from the man she loved. But not tonight. Tonight the house kept its breath and its quiet. Tonight, a mother and a father and a child slept together. Tonight, love lived in the home, and the world for that small time was enough. Morning in Lagos always came with noise. Not gentle noise, but the kind that wakes your bones. Hawkers shouting, buses honking, radios shouting headlines. It was a city that never whispered, only demanded. Chidi stood by the window, his shirt pressed sharp, his tie resting perfectly against his chest. He looked at himself in the mirror again, adjusting his collar as if success could be tightened into shape. The letter Ngozi had found the night before now sat framed on the shelf. "Congratulations, Mr. Chidi Ease, senior property consultant." Ngozi had placed it there herself, proud and grateful. That morning she smiled as she ironed his trousers. "You see what prayers can do?" she said softly. Chidi smiled faintly. "Yes, my dear. Prayer and hard work." But his tone carried something new. Pride, not gratitude. He left early that day, earlier than usual. He said it was because of a new client from Ikoyi, but really it was because he wanted to look like he belonged in that new world. The world of men who didn't eat breakfast at home. Ngozi watched him go, her heart warm but uneasy. She didn't know why she stood by the window a little longer that morning, watching his back disappear into the busy street. Maybe it was love. Maybe it was the whisper of something she couldn't name. Chidi's new office looked nothing like the one he came from. The floors gleamed. The walls carried framed photos of tall buildings in foreign cities. The air smelled of money and ambition. Men walked briskly, laughing too loud, shaking hands too hard. For the first time in years, Chidi felt like he had arrived. His new boss, Mr. Odogwu, was the kind of man who wore gold rings and spoke as if he owned Lagos itself. He liked Chidi, called him my sharp guy, and introduced him to clients with big money and bigger egos. "Follow my lead," Odogwu told him one afternoon, "and you'll soon buy that house in Lekki." At first, Chidi stayed grounded. He called Ngozi during lunch breaks, told her how everything was going, even promised to take her out to eat once the project was finished. He sent her small surprises through dispatch riders. A new hairdryer, fresh comb sets, salon cream. Ngozi's heart swelled with pride. She told her customers, "My husband is moving up, oh. He's even thinking of opening a branch for me one day." Her friend smiled, half jealous, half happy. In the evenings, she'd sweep the salon floor and whisper, "God, don't let this success change him." But Lagos success is a dangerous perfume. Sweet at first until it begins to choke. Soon, Chidi's calls became shorter. Some days, none came at all. He began to stay late, saying, "We have night meetings, dear. It's part of the hustle." When he came home, Ngozi would meet him at the door, smiling tiredly, but he'd brush past her gently, muttering, "I'm too tired to talk tonight." He'd fall on the couch, switch on the TV, and scroll through his phone until sleep caught him. Ngozi would sit beside him silently, watching him laugh at his screen, not realizing that her husband was already slipping into another world. One post, one message, one conversation at a time. Sometimes she'd wake at midnight and find him standing by the window, phone pressed to his ear. He'd whisper, "Yes, tomorrow." "No, I'll make it work." And when she asked who it was, he'd sigh and say, "Work, Ngozi. Just work. Okay?" She stopped asking after a while. When love begins to walk away, it doesn't slam the door. It leaves quietly, one cold night at a time. At his office, Chidi was now known for his sharp tongue and neat suits. He'd grown bolder, louder, more confident. He started spending breaks with men who drove cars worth more than his entire savings. They talked about properties, women, and power. They laughed about wives who didn't know how to upgrade. One of them, Ijele, slapped him on the back one day and said, "Chidi, this your wife. She still runs that small salon, Abi. Guy, you need a babe that fits your new level. Lagos babes go complete your packaging." Chidi laughed awkwardly, waving it off. Ngozi is fine the way she is. But that night when he looked at her sleeping beside him, a small voice in his mind whispered, "She's simple, maybe too simple." He didn't like that thought, but he didn't chase it away either. Meanwhile, Ngozi kept her faith. She prayed every night before bed, holding Jay close. Jay would giggle and say, "Mummy, why do you always pray for Daddy?" And she would reply softly, "Because Daddy is working hard, and Lagos is full of evil." Jay didn't understand, but he'd nod like a little old man, whispering, "Amen." Days turned into weeks. Ngozi started noticing the perfume on Chidi's shirts. Not hers, not anything she owned. She also noticed new phone numbers calling him late at night. When she asked gently, "Who's that?" he snapped, "Well, can't I even take a call in peace?" She went quiet, hurt but patient. She had been raised to believe that when storms start, a woman prays. She doesn't fight. One Friday evening, the city felt heavier than usual. Ngozi sat at the salon, the radio playing love songs she wasn't really hearing. Rain drummed gently on the zinc roof. She watched the empty street and felt something emptying inside her too. Her friend Ifeoma stopped by, cheerful as always. They chatted for a while, but Ngozi's smile didn't reach her eyes. Finally, Ifeoma placed a hand on her shoulder and said quietly, "Success is a sweet fruit, but sometimes it makes men forget who helped them plant the tree. Pray harder, my sister. Lagos money can confuse the heart." Ngozi nodded slowly, swallowing the ache in her throat. That same evening, Chidi attended a cocktail party at a luxury hotel in Victoria Island. The lights were bright, the air smelled of champagne and new money. Men in suits laughed too loudly. Women in glittering dresses moved through the crowd like they were born for the spotlight. Chidi stood near the bar, holding a glass of red wine he didn't even like. He was still learning how to fit into this new world. As he looked around, trying to appear confident, his eyes caught someone across the hall. A tall, elegant woman with glowing brown skin, a confident smile, and a voice that carried like soft music. Zara. She was laughing with two men near the stage, dressed in a red gown that didn't ask for attention. It commanded it. Her laughter was smooth, her movements precise, her eyes sharp. When she turned and her gaze brushed across Chidi's, something inside him stilled. It wasn't love. It wasn't lust. It was curiosity. That dangerous kind that begins as admiration and ends as regret. Their eyes met for only a second. Then she smiled, a quiet, knowing smile, and turned back to her conversation. Chidi's heart beat a little faster. He took another sip of wine, pretending not to care. But inside him, something shifted. He didn't know that one glance could rewrite a man's destiny. He didn't know that behind that beautiful smile was a road that would lead him away from everything he once called home. Greater than that single glance was the first crack in a perfect home. And far away in a quiet corner of Lagos, Ngozi knelt beside Jay's bed, praying once again, unaware that even the strongest prayers sometimes arrive a little too late. There are moments in life when love doesn't die. It just begins to fade quietly, like the last flame of a candle no one noticed burning out. For Ngozi, that moment came slowly, one unreturned call at a time. The change in Chidi was small at first, small enough to explain away. He stopped waiting for breakfast in the mornings. He said things like, "I'll just eat at the office, it's faster." Then he began keeping his phone face down, even while eating. He used to play with Jay's hair after work. Now he brushed the boy aside with tired excuses. "Daddy's busy, Jay. Let me rest." At the salon, Ngozi tried to hide her sadness behind smiles. She laughed with clients, gossiped about Nollywood stars. But every now and then, her eyes drifted to the window, waiting for a message, a sign, anything from Chidi. Her customers noticed. "Madam, are you okay?" one asked softly one afternoon. Ngozi smiled. "I'm fine, my sister. Just tired." But deep down, she was tired of pretending everything was still the same. That Friday, the salon felt unusually quiet. The radio, which usually filled the room with cheerful noise, played a slow love song instead. Ngozi swept the floor absent-mindedly, her thoughts miles away. She picked up her phone and dialed Chidi. It rang twice, then stopped. She tried again. This time, it went straight to voicemail. "Maybe he's in a meeting," she murmured to herself. But the truth was, she had started saying that line too often lately. Meanwhile, across the city, in a restaurant where soft jazz played over low laughter, Chidi sat opposite Zara. She looked stunning. A sleek black gown, gold earrings, perfume that filled the air like temptation itself. Her voice was smooth, playful, and confident. "Mr. Chidi, you're always so serious," she teased, sipping her drink. Chidi smiled, a little embarrassed. "Work stress, you know, Lagos." Lagos, she laughed softly. Lagos is stressful, but you look like someone who knows how to handle it. Her compliment hung in the air longer than it should have. For a while they talked about business, about clients, land prices, and deals. But slowly the conversation slipped into lighter things. Zara talked about her travels, her parties, her dreams. Chidi listened, drawn in by her confidence. He had met beautiful women before, but not like her. Not someone who looked him in the eye like she could read his mind. When she laughed, his chest felt lighter. When she touched his wrist while talking, his pulse jumped. And when he stood up to leave, she smiled at him again and said, "Next time, I'll pay for lunch." "You've done enough today," he laughed, pretending it was nothing. But that small promise, "next time," stayed in his mind all the way home. That night, Ngozi served dinner. Yam porridge with fish, Chidi's favorite. She waited eagerly for him to come home. 8 o'clock, no sign. 9 o'clock, no call. By 10, she was fighting tears. Jay was asleep in her lap, murmuring in his dreams. Finally, the sound of his car outside made her heart leap. He walked in, smelling of expensive cologne and unfamiliar places. "Welcome," she said softly. He nodded, not even looking at her. "Thanks," she smiled faintly. "I made your favorite." He glanced at the table, sighed and muttered, "Ngozi, I already ate." The words hit her harder than he knew. "You ate?" she repeated, forcing a smile. "Yes," he said casually, removing his wristwatch. "Office dinner." He didn't notice the quiet tremble in her voice as she whispered, "All right." She packed the untouched food away, washed the plates, and wiped her tears quietly while he scrolled through his phone in the parlor. Later that night, as she lay beside him, she turned and asked softly, "Chidi, are you okay? You've been distant lately. Did I do something wrong?" He sighed loudly. "Ngozi, must everything be about feelings?" "I'm fine, I'm just busy, but you don't talk to me anymore," she said, her voice shaking. He turned to her sharply. "Ngozi, please, I need peace, not pressure." The silence that followed was heavy. Ngozi swallowed her pain and turned away. Her eyes burned with tears she couldn't let fall. In the dark, she whispered to herself, "Peace. I've only ever tried to give you peace." But he didn't hear her. The next morning, Jay ran to Chidi with a drawing he had made. A stick family of 3 holding hands under a smiling sun. "Daddy, see? It's us." Chidi smiled briefly, patting his head. "Nice, my boy." But when Jay asked, "Can we go out today?" Chidi replied, "Maybe next weekend, okay? Promise?" "Yes, promise." Jay smiled. The kind of smile only children have when they still believe promises. Ngozi watched the exchange quietly, her chest tightening. She didn't know why, but something inside her told her that promise would be broken too. Days rolled into weeks. Chidi's late nights became routine. His laughter at home faded, and when he did speak, it was short, impatient, distracted. One evening, Ngozi caught a glimpse of his phone screen. Zara's name flashed with a heart emoji. Her heart dropped. She wanted to ask, but fear held her back. What if asking meant hearing the truth she wasn't ready for? That night, she cried quietly beside Jay, who was already asleep. She didn't cry because she hated Chidi. She cried because she still loved him too much to give up. Meanwhile, in a bright restaurant across town, Zara leaned over her table and said to Chidi, "Your wife must be proud of you. You look like a man every woman would fight to keep." He smiled faintly. "She's a good woman." Zara tilted her head. "Good?" she repeated softly, her voice teasing. "That sounds like a polite word for boring." He laughed, shaking his head. "You're impossible." But inside, a part of him agreed, and that was the beginning of his downfall. Back at home, Ngozi couldn't sleep. She sat by the window, watching the city lights blink far away. Her Bible lay open beside her, but she couldn't read. She whispered instead, "God, if my husband's heart is drifting, please bring it back before it's too late." But as she prayed, Chidi was already somewhere else, laughing, sipping wine, and walking deeper into a world that would soon drown him. And in the middle of the night, While rain began to fall softly over Lagos, a small crack appeared in what used to be a perfect marriage. It was invisible, silent even, but deep enough to one day break everything. Because sometimes love doesn't leave in anger, it leaves quietly, through the shadows between smiles. The office air felt different that Monday morning. It was bright, alive, buzzing with laughter and the smell of expensive perfume. Chidi walked through the hallway, holding a file in one hand and a cup of coffee in the other. He had a meeting with a potential investor, a woman who, according to his boss, was young, smart, and rich enough to buy half of Lagos if she felt like it. Her name, Zara Okizi. She was the talk of the real estate circuit, an event hostess turned influencer who had made herself known for her lavish parties and her taste for fine property. Rumor had it she could walk into any room and make everyone look twice. When Chidi entered the meeting room, she was already there, sitting by the window, sunlight bouncing off her skin like gold. She wore a white dress that whispered wealth and confidence. Her perfume, soft, sweet, and dangerous, filled the air before she even spoke. She looked up and smiled. "Mr. Chidi Ease," she asked. Her voice was smooth, almost melodic. He nodded, setting his files on the table. "Yes, Miss Zara. It's a pleasure to finally meet you." "The pleasure is mine," she said, extending her hand. Her grip was firm but graceful. "I've heard you're one of the best consultants in this company." Chidi smiled, modest but proud. "I try my best." She tilted her head slightly, studying him. "You look like a man who doesn't just try, you deliver." That small compliment, soft as it sounded, found its way deep into Chidi's chest. He didn't realize it yet, but it would echo there for a long time. The meeting went smoothly. She asked smart questions, laughed easily, and leaned forward whenever he spoke. She had a way of listening that made him feel like the most important man in the room. When she smiled, her eyes held a sparkle that was hard to ignore. By the time they were done discussing land papers and figures, the air between them was no longer just professional. It was charged, quiet but alive. "Thank you, Mr. Ease," Zara said, standing up. "You've made this process sound so easy." I like that Chidi smiled politely. "That's what I'm here for, to make things simple." She chuckled softly. "Simple is good, but sometimes simple can be boring." He looked at her, unsure how to respond. She smiled wider, collecting her bag. "Don't worry, I'm just teasing." As she turned to leave, her hand brushed lightly against his arm. Not an accident, not entirely innocent. And in that one small touch, Chidi felt something shift inside him. That evening, he couldn't stop thinking about her. He tried to distract himself with work, then with TV, then with sleep. But her voice replayed in his head. Simple can be boring. At dinner, Ngozi noticed his silence. "Chidi, are you okay?" she asked gently. "I'm fine," he replied quickly. But he wasn't. He was restless. Not from guilt, but from curiosity. The next day, Zara sent a short message to his phone. "Good morning, Mr. Ease. Thank you again for yesterday. You're good at what you do, and easy to talk to." Chidi stared at the message longer than necessary. Then before he could stop himself, he replied, "Thank you, Miss Zara. You're a good listener. Not many people pay attention these days." It was a harmless exchange, or so he thought. That day, he found himself smiling at his phone more often. He began to check it between meetings, hoping for another message. And when she texted again, this time about grabbing lunch to discuss a few ideas, he didn't even hesitate. They met at a quiet restaurant in Victoria Island. Zara arrived late, wearing sunglasses and confidence. "Sorry," she said playfully. "Lagos traffic doesn't respect beauty." Chidi laughed, relaxing instantly. They talked, not just about business this time, but about life. She told stories about her travels, her dreams, her struggles. She spoke with ease, never afraid to say what she thought. When she laughed, it filled the room. And when she leaned closer, her perfume made it hard to think. At one point, she said softly, "You know, you don't talk like a married man." He blinked. "What do you mean by that?" "I mean, most married men I meet sound tired. But you still have spark." He laughed awkwardly. "I'm not that old." she smiled. You're not old, Chidi. You're just untouched by boredom. I like that. She said his name like it was something she wanted to taste. That night, Chidi came home later than usual. Ngozi was waiting, worry written on her face. Chidi, where have you been? I've been calling you since 7. He dropped his briefcase on the chair. Ngozi, I told you, I had a late meeting. But it's almost 10. He raised a hand sharply. Please, don't start. I'm tired. The firmness in his voice silenced her. She nodded, biting her lip, her eyes glassy. Jay peeked from behind the door, whispering, Daddy, are you angry? Chidi turned to him, forcing a smile. No, my boy. Daddy's just tired. Ngozi turned away quickly so he wouldn't see her tears. She whispered to herself. He used to come home smiling. As weeks passed, Chidi and Zara grew closer. She began calling him Chidi instead of Mr. Ease. They met often, sometimes for business, sometimes just to talk. Each time she found a way to make him feel admired. You're different, she'd say. Different how? You don't act like those married men who've given up on life. Her words were poison wrapped in honey. Sweet going in, deadly later. And Chidi drank every drop. At home, Ngozi felt the emptiness growing. She could feel it in his silence, in the way he avoided her eyes. She missed their laughter, their late-night talks, their small arguments that always ended with smiles. Now the house was cold, not because of weather, but because of absence. Some nights she sat outside the salon, looking at the sky, wondering what she did wrong. She didn't know that she hadn't done anything, except love too deeply and trust too much. One evening, Chidi was at the office when Zara appeared at his door. Busy? She asked, smiling. He shook his head. Not for you. Good, she said softly, stepping closer. She placed a small box on his desk, a gold wristwatch. For you, she said. A small thank you for helping me with that deal, he protested. Zara, you didn't have to. I wanted to, she interrupted, her voice low. You've been kind to me, and I like kind men. There was a long pause. Their eyes met, and something wordless passed between them. A tension, electric and dangerous. Chidi cleared his throat, pretending to look away. Thank you, Zara. It's beautiful, she smiled. You deserve beautiful things. And as she turned to leave, she added with a playful glance, See you tomorrow, handsome. Chidi sat there long after she was gone, the watch heavy in his hand, his heart heavier still. That night he didn't sleep easily. He tossed and turned, his mind filled with thoughts he didn't want to name. Ngozi reached out to hold him in her sleep, but he shifted away. She stirred and murmured his name softly. Chidi. He didn't answer. He stared into the dark, the echo of Zara's voice whispering again in his mind. You deserve beautiful things. And for the first time in his marriage, Chidi began to believe that maybe the life he had, the simple home, the small joys, the quiet wife, was not enough. He didn't know it yet, but that single belief would cost him everything. Because in Lagos, temptation doesn't knock, it smiles. And Zara had already smiled. They say the most dangerous lies are not the ones told to others, but the ones we tell ourselves to make wrong things feel right. For the first few days after their lunch, Chidi tried to convince himself that nothing unusual had happened. Zara was just a client. Beautiful, yes, but still a client. He told himself that he was just being friendly, professional even. But the human heart is clever. It can hide deceit behind reasons that sound noble. It started with small things. A message here, a joke there, a good morning that turned into, I miss our talks. Zara had a way of drawing him in without trying too hard. She didn't beg for attention, she commanded it. And each time her name appeared on his phone screen, Chidi felt something strange, a quiet thrill he hadn't felt in years. One afternoon, while sitting at his desk, Zara walked in unannounced. She wore a cream jumpsuit that seemed to move with light itself. Her perfume reached him before her words did. Mr. Chidi, she said playfully, are you avoiding me? He looked up, startled but smiling. Avoiding you? Why would I do that? She leaned against the doorframe, folding her arms. Because you promised to show me that new site in Ikoyi, and I've been waiting. Chidi laughed nervously. Ah, yes. I've been very busy. She raised an eyebrow. Too busy for your favorite client? That sentence made him pause. Favorite client. Something about the way she said it made him forget where he was. He stood up, grabbed his car keys, and said, All right, let's go now, before my boss gives me another pile of files. The drive to Ikoyi was quiet at first. Zara sat beside him, her sunglasses reflecting the city's glare. Traffic crawled, horns blared, and vendors tapped on car windows offering bottled water and plantain chips.
Lagos never rests, she murmured, looking out the window. Chidi smiled. That's the price of chasing success. She turned to him, her lips curling into a soft smile. And are you chasing success or peace? The question caught him off guard. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. Finally, he laughed awkwardly. Both, I guess. She looked away again, whispering, Sometimes, one destroys the other. At the sight, they walked through the quiet plots of land, the wind carrying the smell of the ocean nearby. Zara asked questions, took photos, and listened with a kind of focus that made Chidi feel seen. When they finished, she turned to him and said softly, You're good at what you do. You have a calmness most men don't have. He smiled modestly. I've had to learn patience in this city. And your wife? She asked suddenly. Is she patient too? The question came like a soft slap. He hesitated, then nodded. She's patient. Too patient sometimes. Zara smiled faintly, as if she already knew that answer. She said nothing more, just stood there, quiet, graceful, dangerous. That evening, when Chidi returned home, Ngozi ran to the door. Her eyes were tired but warm. Welcome, my husband, she said softly. How was work today? He nodded absently, walking past her. Fine. Just busy. Should I warm your food? He waved a hand. I already ate. Ngozi froze for a second, the same line again. She forced a smile and nodded. Okay. He didn't see the way her shoulders dropped when she turned away. In the following weeks, Zara began sending him small gifts. A wristwatch. A designer tie. A cologne that smelled like luxury. Each one came with a small note. For motivation. To remind you that you deserve more. Because men like you shouldn't fade. Chidi told himself it was harmless. He told himself she was just appreciative. But the truth was that each gift pulled him further away from home, from the simplicity that once made him happy. Ngozi started noticing the changes. He wore new things she didn't buy. He smelled of new perfume she didn't recognize. And he no longer left his phone unattended. One evening, while folding his shirts, she found a small note tucked inside his jacket pocket. It read, You make even work feel like a vacation, see? Her hands trembled. For a moment, the world stopped. She stood there in silence, staring at the paper, her heart pounding. Then she folded it carefully and placed it back, as if returning evidence she didn't want to see. That night, she couldn't eat. She couldn't even pray. She just sat on the bed, watching Chidi scroll on his phone and smile, a smile she hadn't seen directed at her in a long time. The next morning, she tried to speak. Chidi, she said softly as he buttoned his shirt. Can I ask you something? He sighed impatiently. Ngozi, please not now. I'm running late. She swallowed. It's important. He turned sharply. What is it? She hesitated. Who is Zara? He froze. His hand stopped mid-button. Then, without looking at her, he said coldly, She's a client. Why are you going through my things? I wasn't, I just saw. You just saw what? He snapped. Ngozi, don't start this nonsense. Must you always create problems where there are none? Her eyes filled with tears. I'm not creating problems, I'm just asking. He cut her off. Enough! I don't have time for childish jealousy. He grabbed his bag and stormed out, slamming the door behind him. The sound echoed through the small house like thunder. Ngozi stood there, shaking, tears rolling down her face. Jay came out of his room, rubbing his eyes. "Mummy, why are you crying?" She forced a smile through the tears. "I'm not crying, my son. Mummy's just tired." He hugged her small waist, whispering, "Don't worry, Daddy will smile again." Her tears came harder then, not because of Chitty's anger, but because of Jay's innocence. He still believed his father would come back home, not just to the house, but to their hearts. That evening, Chitty sat at a hotel bar with Zara. She could tell he was upset. "Rough day?" she asked, touching his arm lightly. He sighed. "Just stress from home." She smiled knowingly. "You don't owe anyone explanations, Chitty. You work hard. You deserve peace." Peace. That word again. The same word Ngozi had used in her prayers, but here, in Zara's mouth, it meant something different. Zara leaned closer. "You know, sometimes peace doesn't live where we expect it. Sometimes we have to go where we're appreciated." He looked at her for a long moment. The music in the background faded. The noise around them disappeared. And then, he made the smallest mistake that would change his life forever. He didn't move away. When he came home that night, Ngozi was sitting outside, waiting. The streetlight cast a soft glow over her tired face. She looked up as he approached, her eyes full of quiet pain. "Chitty," she said gently. "Please, can we talk?" He looked at her for a moment, then sighed heavily. "Ngozi, I'm not in the mood." "Please," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I don't want to fight. I just want us to find our way back." He shook his head. "Not tonight." He walked past her, into the house. She sat there for a long time, staring into the night, her heart breaking silently. Above her, the moon hung pale and cold. Somewhere in the distance, a church bell rang. And in that lonely sound, Ngozi felt something she had never felt before. A fear that her husband was slowly becoming a stranger she could no longer reach. Sometimes, the first betrayal doesn't come with a kiss or a confession. Sometimes, it begins with small gifts and big lies. And the silence that follows is louder than any fight. The lies had grown legs. They walked into Chitty's life, sat comfortably beside him, and made themselves at home. What started as late nights and secret lunches had now become something darker, a double life, quiet and poisonous. It began one Friday afternoon. Chitty's boss called him into his office, congratulating him for his recent sales. "Chitty, you're one of our best consultants," the man said, patting his shoulder. "Clients trust you. You deserve more independence." More independence. Those words lit a spark in him. By the time he walked out, the idea had already formed, a personal workspace, away from the noise, away from interruptions, away from the eyes of anyone who might ask questions. He convinced himself it was for business convenience. But deep down, he knew it was something else. That weekend he found it, a small, furnished apartment on the mainland, quiet and neat, perfect for clients who prefer private meetings. He paid a 6-month rent in cash. And when the agent asked, "Will your wife be joining you?" he smiled faintly and said, "No. This is just for work." But the truth was simple. He wasn't building space for work. He was building space for sin. At home, Ngozi noticed the change immediately. He no longer left for work at the same time every morning. Sometimes he'd say, "I'm working from the new site today." Other times, "There's a client I'm meeting outside the office." Each excuse sounded harmless, but the tone behind it, cold, distant, told a different story. Still, Ngozi didn't argue. She had learned that every word she said now felt like noise to him. So she prayed instead. Every night she knelt by the bed after he fell asleep, whispering into the darkness, "God, if this is a test, give me strength. If my husband is lost, bring him back before it's too late." Meanwhile, at the new apartment, Chitty began a life that didn't look like his own. Zara came and went freely. Her laughter filled the small rooms. Her high heels clicked across the tiles like a song. She filled the place with her scent, her makeup kits, and her careless giggles. The walls that once echoed silence now held whispers of betrayal. When she poured him wine, she'd say things like, "You deserve comfort, Chidi. You work too hard to live small." He'd nod, smiling proudly, believing her lies because they fed his ego. She called him, "My king," and it made him forget the woman who called him, "My husband." One afternoon, as he rested on the couch with Zara lying across his chest, she said something that made his heart flutter and sink all at once. "Chidi, you make me feel safe," she murmured. He smiled. "That's because I care about you." She raised her head slightly and asked, "Do you love me?" The question struck him like lightning. He froze for a second, unsure of what to say. In that pause, his mind flashed with Ngozi's face. Her tired eyes, her prayers, her soft, "I love you," whispered every morning. He swallowed hard, pushing the thought away. Then he looked into Zara's eyes and said, "Yes, I love you." The lie rolled easily off his tongue. And just like that, he crossed a line he could never return from. Back home, Ngozi tried to keep her days normal. She poured her heart into her salon, working harder, smiling at clients even when her spirit felt broken. But every time she looked at Jay, she felt fear. Fear that her son was watching his father disappear piece by piece. "Jay," she asked one evening, "how was school?" He grinned. "Fine, Mummy. Teacher said my drawing was the best." She smiled weakly. "That's my boy." Then he added innocently, "Mummy, when is Daddy coming home early again? I want us to eat together." Her smile froze. She didn't have an answer. She just pulled him close and whispered, "Soon, my child. Soon." But even as she said it, she knew soon might never come. One night, Chidi returned home much later than usual. Ngozi was waiting at the dining table, untouched food still warm. She stood as he entered. "Chidi," she said softly, "can we talk?" He frowned. "About what now?" "Please," she begged. "It's important." He sighed loudly and dropped his briefcase. "Okay, talk." She hesitated, her hands trembling slightly. "Chidi, I know something is wrong between us. I don't want to fight, I just want to understand. Why are you pushing me away?" He looked at her, cold and distant. "Ngozi, not everything is about you," he snapped. "You don't even ask how my day goes anymore. You just complain." Her voice cracked. "I don't complain, I only worry about us." "There's no us to worry about," he shouted suddenly. "I need space, Ngozi. Peace. Is that too much to ask?" The words hit her like a slap. She took a step back, eyes wide with shock. "You need peace from me?" she whispered. He turned away, rubbing his forehead. "I didn't mean it like that." But the damage was already done. She nodded slowly, tears filling her eyes. "Then maybe I've failed as your wife," she said quietly. He didn't answer. He simply walked past her, into the bedroom, leaving her standing in silence. That night, she cried until her eyes hurt. And in the next room, Jay sat awake, listening to the muffled sounds of his mother's sobs, not understanding, but feeling every ache. A week later, Chidi officially moved most of his clothes to the new apartment. When Ngozi asked where he was going, he said, "It's closer to the new project site. It's just temporary." Temporary. That was the word he used. But the silence that followed said otherwise. That night, Ngozi sat by Jay's bedside as he slept. She brushed his hair gently and whispered, "If I ever lose your father completely, my son, I'll still love him, because love doesn't vanish, it just hurts quieter." At the new apartment, Chidi's temporary arrangement began to look permanent. Zara started leaving her things, dresses, shoes, even toothbrushes. She cooked occasionally, danced around the living room in oversized shirts, and called him babe. He started coming home to Ngozi only twice a week. When he did, he brought gifts, perfumes, small jewelry, empty apologies wrapped in smiles. "Sorry, my dear. Work is stressful. I'm doing all this for us." I just need some time. Each lie came smoother than the last. Ngozi smiled weakly, took the gifts, and said thank you, not because she believed him, but because she was too tired to argue anymore. One night, as Chidi lay beside Zara watching a movie, his phone rang. It was Ngozi. He hesitated, then silenced it. Zara noticed. Wife? She asked casually, her tone teasing. He nodded. Yeah. She smiled, sipping her wine. You should pick up. She might suspect. He shook his head. Let her sleep. Zara laughed softly. You men are all the same. You want freedom but still fear being caught. He frowned. That's not true. She leaned in close, her lips brushing his ear. Then prove it. He looked at her, and forgot about the phone completely. At home, Ngozi sat with the phone still pressed to her ear, the line silent. She waited a few more seconds, then dropped it slowly. She stared at the wall for a long time, her hands trembling. Then she whispered to herself, I'm losing him, but I'll keep praying. When Chidi finally came home 2 days later, Jay ran to him, excited. Daddy! You promised to take me to the park. Chidi looked at him blankly for a second, then smiled weakly. Oh, right. I've been busy, my boy. Next week, okay? Promise? Promise. Ngozi watched the scene from the kitchen doorway, her heart breaking. She could see the pattern repeating. Broken promises, fading love, and the quiet destruction of a home built on prayers. That night, as rain fell gently outside, Ngozi knelt beside her bed again. Her tears fell freely now. She didn't ask for miracles anymore, just strength to survive what was coming. And far away, in a hidden apartment filled with perfume and laughter, Chidi slept peacefully, unaware that every moment of joy he stole was building the sorrow that would one day destroy him completely. Sometimes destruction doesn't come with thunder. Sometimes it comes with a rented key. And a silence that grows too loud to ignore. They say when the devil wants to destroy a man, he first gives him everything he ever prayed for. Just to show him how little those things truly matter.